Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us here on the Infinite Prosperity Podcast. My name is Louisa Havers, and I help high achievers, entrepreneurs, and coaches lift the lid on life and business so that they can live at their highest value. Each episode, we will bring you our favourite founders, CEOs, and guest experts to share with you their insights and strategies to expand your wealth consciousness, your spiritual leadership, and aligned business strategies. We know that living in alignment with your soul's mission is what fulfills you, and we're here to show you how to achieve this in an energetically aligned way. If you haven't already, be sure to claim your free abundance activation in the Akashic Records. Go to louisahavers.com/gift to unlock your abundance activation today. And if you'd like my support in having aligned success in life and business, then contact me at www.louisahavers.com and let's explore together if it's an aligned match. Get ready to live at your highest value and to expand into your next level of money as you elevate and receive more. You create more for others. Righty ho, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome, everybody. I am so excited to be having this conversation today with a very special guest, all the way from Australia. A huge welcome, Louise.
My gosh, thank you so much. And isn't it so wonderful that even though I'm on the other side of the planet, we can connect in this way? How amazing is that?
It always blows my mind. Yeah, because we would never have met otherwise. So I'm so grateful that we have in this way. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you and share your bio, if that's okay. So we can open up the conversation and people can get to know you and to see why I'm so excited for us to have this conversation. So Louise O'Reilly is a Wawara Noongar Aboriginal woman based in Borroloo in Perth, for those of you not in Australia. She's a relentless force against the oppressive status quo, fueled by her love for her children. She's on a mission to reshape, yes, the entrepreneurial world with inclusivity at its core. As an inclusion, diversity, equity, and allyship coach, she supports heart-centered entrepreneurs offering the Inclusion Creators Collective membership. Oh, that sounds awesome. One-to-one coaching and speaking services. Louise's world, vision of a world where everyone is liberated to feel free, safe, and to be their authentic self. Beyond her business, she was a freelance writer for Amnesty International Australia, a radio host on Noongar Radio, and a Miss NAIDOC Perth finalist. You can connect with Louise on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and her website, louiseoreilly.com.au. That is, I should say. A huge welcome, a huge welcome. And we were just talking before we started recording about pronunciation because we were both reflecting that I'm Louisa, you're Louise, and sometimes you get called Louisa, and sometimes I get called
Yes.
Louise. What is that all about? So one of the things that we started speaking about that was because of me wanting to learn how to pronounce where you are, where you're from correctly, because the
Yeah.
language is actually very different, which I wasn't aware of.
Yes, yes. So it's Noongar language. So that's I'm an Aboriginal woman, and my community is Wadawurrung and Noongar peoples. So they're two separate groups, but they form part of me, both of them. And I was just explaining that we actually have um, language and sounds in our language, in particular the Noongar language, which actually aren't in the English language. So sometimes when we have our words, we try to spell them in a way phonetically so people can say them, but the sounds actually aren't in the English language. So we don't have a written language, we've actually got a verbal language. And so it's always just best to ask, how do you say this? And then we can say, this is how you say this particular thing. So with Nyunga, it's Nyunga, and with Borlu, it's Borlu. So really emphasize the R in those things. But it's absolutely okay to say it incorrectly, because this is all about the learning process. It's all completely part of this whole inclusion journey, because we are going to start learning about different groups of people who aren't in our community, but we want to make sure we're including them. So that is all absolutely part of it. It is amazing. And if you wouldn't mind, is it okay if I did an acknowledgement of country? I'm not even sure you even are aware of what that might include.
Please do, yes.
Okay, beautiful. I always make sure I do an acknowledgement of country whenever there is a formal or semi formal gathering of people. And of course, on a podcast, that's a very semi formal gathering because we know people are going to come here. So,
Mm.
an acknowledgement of country, if you're not aware, is a way of acknowledging the custodians of the lands from where we are joining from as a way of showing respect and acknowledging that they are the first people and the custodians. So, here's my acknowledgement. I, Louise O'Reilly of the Wadawa and Noongar people, would like to acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional and ongoing custodians on the lands and waters on which I'm joining you from. I pay deep respect to them and acknowledge them as the custodians across all of time. They have been, they are now, and they will always be the custodians. I'd also like to pay respects to the elders and thank them for their love, their guidance, and their community leadership, and also extend acknowledgement to the custodians from the lands on which you are listening from as well, and pay respect to the elders in whatever title they refer to themselves in those lands.
Oh, I've got covered in goosebumps. Thank you so much. I haven't heard that before, so that was a real privilege to hear that and to really feel the respect. Can really feel that. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that with us. That was
You're
beautiful.
welcome. It's a customary practice we do here in Australia. It's not something that's widely done elsewhere, but it's certainly something in the Aboriginal culture we have done for millennia. And it is something now we are inviting the rest of the community to join in on as well.
I think that's really beautiful. Thank you. I feel very privileged that you shared that. That's just so awesome. Oh, Louise, what a fabulous start to our conversation. I know when we had our pre-chat, we were like, oh my word, we could chat for chat for hours. So would
Oh,
love
yes.
I know. Would love to dive in because you've really been on a mission and there's so much that you have shared in already in your bio. But let's start at the beginning. So how did you start your kind of business? Where you are now. What's the journey that you've been on?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm always a little bit sad to say this, but I was born. And unfortunately, the culture here in Australia is one that's not very inclusive or welcoming or loving towards Aboriginal people. And I have always identified as Aboriginal in my heart. That's my community. That's who I belong to. Uh, so it was really quite a struggle growing up. When I was quite young, I recognized at quite a young age that different groups of people were treated differently depending on the community they belonged to. And in my child mind, I kind of came to the conclusion because I saw Aboriginal people constantly being excluded, constantly being made to be unwelcome and feeling as if that we are not valued, all those kinds of things coming up. So in my child mind, I came to the conclusion that it must mean we are bad or we are wrong or we are there's something not quite right with us, that we just as humans are not okay. And so that played a big part into my identity, and it made me question who I was as a person. And I knew in my heart that I was an Aboriginal person. And yet there were all these negative stereotypes that were constantly being told that this is what an Aboriginal person is. And I couldn't understand. I'm like, well, that's not me. I don't understand this. So it was really confusing. And it got to the point where it was really super hard in my teens. And you want to belong. We
Mm,
all want to belong somewhere. And the feelings that I had was, this is my country. This is where I belong to. So I'm responsible to. I belong to this land here, yet I'm not welcome. And if I'm not even welcome in my own country, I must not be welcome anywhere. I must not belong anywhere. So it was really, really tough. But as marginalized people do, we are strong and we're resilient. We shouldn't have to be. This is the thing. We shouldn't have to be, but we are. And if we don't grow that strength and we don't become resilient, we just cease to exist. If you can get what I'm trying to say in that space there. Um, so with that resilience, you just learn to get on, and I did. But then something amazing and beautiful and magical happened. Was I fell pregnant with with our first bub, and it was such a wonderful time. And then I just remember this one moment. It was a very pivotal moment in this story where I just thought to myself, "Oh my goodness, I'm going to birth a beautiful little human into a world that treated me so horrifically. The racism, the colorism, the sexism, the genderism, all those bits and pieces wrapped in there. And I'm going to bring a baby into here, which wasn't good enough for me. It's not good enough for anyone." So in that moment, I thought I'm going to do everything I can to change the world so that no one has to experience those kinds of marginalization and exclusion. And then our babies can live amazing lives. And it just kind of all just rolled on from there. It went into blogging and it went into uh, talking on radio and it went into Miss NAIDOC stuff. So it kind of just progressed. And then I got to a point where I thought, I'm going to do the big leap into doing this as my own business and really make a living out of making this mission and changing the world. So here I am.
I love it. Oh, I'm so glad you are here because it's an incredible mission and something that we really need to have more and more people having good conversations and feeling safe to ask questions, and to
Yeah.
be able to say we don't know whatever the thing is, that we're talking about, so that we can really learn to understand and to ultimately make the world a safer place. And like you were saying, for our children not to grow up and have those experiences that you experienced. And globally, people experience this marginalization. Nobody should experience it. This is a big mission.
It's huge. Yes, absolutely. But it is so worth it. And we deserve it. We deserve better than what we have. We deserve better than the status quo. And we do have the power to change it. We just need to step into that empowerment and make it happen in our worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. You were saying there in our world, and as you were saying that, I was thinking that one of the things that thinking about the listeners, thinking maybe they're thinking, well, what can I do? As entrepreneurs. And I think there is so much that, we can do as entrepreneurs. And often it's not realizing that there is. What sort of things come to mind as part of this conversation from your perspective that people can do?
Oh, well, the very first thing I want to jump on is say that every single person has a place and has a role and has a part to play in this. We come with our own very unique values and drives and inspiration and talents and gifts. So we all have something very particular to offer this movement, which I call the inclusion revolution. We
Ah,
all have something that we can do. And if you aren't doing your little bit in it, we're missing you. We really are missing you and missing how you can contribute to it. But there are so many different things that entrepreneurs and online business owners can do to be inclusive. And it can be things like altering the way you're writing your copy so that the language that you're using is inclusive of marginalized people. It could be doing things like doing the work behind the scenes to understand your privilege and what that means, to unpack your biases that you may have that are socially conditioned in you against marginalized groups of people. And then we all have them.
mhm.
It's not saying that it's bad that you have them or it's bad that you have privilege, because it's not. This is a system we're born into and we're conditioned in a way to treat people differently based on the communities they belong to. But even though we aren't responsible for building this system, these frameworks of oppression, we certainly are responsible right now to change what has been. So we didn't create it, but right now we can choose this isn't good enough for us. This is not okay for this to happen. And there are decisions we can make in business that change that story, that dismantle those frameworks, dismantle things like the patriarchy, colonialism, racism, white supremacy, all those kinds of things. Something else that you can do in business is look at listening to marginalized people and learning about different cultural nuances that they have. And this not only will help you in your business to be able to connect with different communities of people and attract marginalized communities into your space, it'll help you be able to create a safe space for them when they get there. It also will help you be able to work with your clients at deeper levels because you have a deeper understanding of the things that impact them in their everyday lives. There are so many different things that you can do to support marginalized people and dismantle those things that are causing those problems. There's other things like assessing your accessibility. How accessible are you for marginalized groups of people? The way business has been built was purely with the focus of benefiting the most privileged people in our society. And just so you know, that doesn't include women. That doesn't include people who aren't white. So that doesn't include Black people or brown people or any other people of color. It doesn't include Indigenous people. It doesn't include people who are disabled. It doesn't include Jewish people. It doesn't include all these different groups of people, which you probably, if you're a listener, identify with quite a lot of those different groups. So knowing that business wasn't built to support all of those different communities of people, we can start to look at it and go, well, how is mainstream business providing challenges or obstacles for those communities to access the services or the support or the business stuff that they need? And then we can say, well, I'm not going to play this game anymore. This is my business, and I'm going to do it in a way that is one, inclusive, is two, acknowledges my privilege and allows me to talk about that privilege, allows me to talk about marginalization and the things that aren't right in this world, and also lets me look at the accessibility side of it as well and run it in a way that really allows the people you're here to support, the people you're here to help bring your magic to, your healing to, bring them closer to you and actually work with them.
I love it. There's so much there that people can pick up and start to explore what they can, the immediate next steps that they can take. I just want to pick up on the piece around just to dive in deeper on this because this is something that I think I really want to highlight. So from my perspective, one of the things I talk about with people is about our consciousness and our beliefs and our programming. And we're on the Infinite Prosperity podcast, and I talk about
Yes.
prosperity and our money mindset and all those things. And many people will recognize, entrepreneurs know they need to sort out their money mindset because they've got programs in there, and that it's a lifelong journey because you'll continue getting new programs in there unless you kind of are actually very conscious about it and consciously take care of your consciousness around that. I'm just inviting people to kind of go, aha, actually, so if I'm really up for recognizing I need to sort out my money mindset, then we absolutely have to do our unconscious bias work continually for the rest of our lives, because otherwise programs are going to get planted in there from the media, the systems that we're in, messages that we're reading, all the things that you were talking about earlier as well. And we're not going to be aware of the blind spots that we have. And I think this is one of the ones where people can think, I'm not racist, I'm a good person. I love
Yes.
everybody and I don't see difference, and think that that
Yes.
means that they aren't being racist, if that makes sense. And it's
Yes.
that bit of I don't see difference. I see everybody the same as me that I
Yeah.
think is kind of a I want to say misleading. I don't know if that's the right thing. I think it's a blind spot actually. Does that
Yeah,
make
it's a
sense?
problem. It is
Mm,
a massive problem, and actually, it wouldn't be communicating what you think it communicates. It actually communicates the opposite. When you're saying, "I don't see difference," or "I don't see color," that's when you are denying people's identity, or that's when you're saying, I only recognize and see you when you don't have those different colors or you don't belong to different communities. Only when you are stripped down to be like me do I recognize you, do I see you. And marginalized communities, we are constantly fighting for our right for our identity and fighting for our right to our culture and our practices and our hairstyles and our clothing and our language. And then we have people who, are very kind people,
mm,
but that kind of rhetoric is very harmful and it doesn't actually help the conversation. The conversation, which would be more helpful, is more along the lines of I see your difference and I love you and accept you. I see we are so different and aren't we amazing? Those kinds of conversations are better conversations to have to really acknowledge difference and know they're both valuable, both loved, both welcome. But I'd also want to touch on the whole prosperity thing too. And it's important to understand that with things like money, uh, with in terms of marginalization, it affects marginalized communities. Money affects marginalized communities in different ways, and our access to money and finance and all those kinds of things are very affected by the communities we belong to. I love the analogy that has. I saw, and I think it was an African American activist talking about in America. Just imagine this concept that there is a monopoly game played and that Black people were not allowed to play for the first 50 rounds of the board, and then they were allowed to come in. But all the property has already been purchased and all the money is already circulating. This is the kind of thing that what happens with marginalized communities, not only in the States, but all around the world, here in Australia as well, is there is it's almost like we're starting the line. The starting line is further back, and
mm,
there are obstacles along the track too, because you also are met with things like racism. So even just getting things like a job can be more difficult if you have a name that isn't a typical English name, or the way you look isn't white, or you belong to another marginalized community. All these things can prevent you from accessing that money. And it also is ingrained in our mindsets as well. So I'll give an example for me, for instance. Um, there has been, and I'm working on my money mindset, all that kind of. I'm doing behind the scenes stuff too. Don't worry.
we all
But
are.
one of my stories is that Aboriginal people don't have money, or Aboriginal people must be in poverty, and this is something that is intergenerationally being passed through because when colonizers came through, Aboriginal people were used for labor and they weren't paid any wages. They were often given some rations, but if they were given wages, often the people who are the employer will keep those wages on their behalf. So there is millions and millions, and I think it's even into the billions of wages, dollars that have not been paid out to these
Wow.
Aboriginal families. So there's all these kinds of nuances
Mm,
around prosperity and money that happen. But then there's another beautiful flip side too, that business for all cultures doesn't always look like an exchange of money. And different cultures do business very differently. Here, Aboriginal people have been doing business and trading all around the world for thousands of years. much longer than we have been colonized in this space. And so business doesn't always have to look the same. So there's a beautiful few little things you can think about in terms of prosperity. But then as a business owner, you can think about, is your business equitable?
Mm.
So
More about that.
equitability is when you can recognize in your business that there are privileged people
Mm.
and there are marginalized people. And that marginalized people may not have the same access to finances or money as privileged people will. So through your business, you can do pricing strategies that are equitable to consider and include marginalizations that may be in those places. And there are so many different ways that you can have those different pricing strategies. And it is a way of basically offsetting that marginalization as well.
I love that. You're reminding me of one. I used to. I think I mentioned this when we were having our pre-chat, but for the listeners that may not know this, but I used to, when in my former life, as a senior manager in social services, one of the things I led on was creating equitable services and inclusion. And one of the conversations I used to have with managers of their services, which is ultimately, they were leading on multi-million pound services. So it's like having a business within a business. They were the leader of that business, was around how they make their services equitable, and the sort of the illusion, if you like, that if everything is the same, that is equitable, but actually that's not. That's creating barriers for people. For true equity, we need to acknowledge the difference and to put something extra in place so that it is then equitable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. There's a difference between equality and equity. We're
Mm.
not aiming for equality in this space because if, and I don't know if any of you have seen, there's a beautiful, like a meme kind of thing of people looking over a fence
I was
and to
about to,
say
yeah.
they're all different heights. And so there's one who's quite small, then one a medium, and one really tall. And if you considered equality, you might give every single one of them a box to
Mm.
stand on. But giving everyone the same thing doesn't mean everyone will see. The smallest one still can't see over the fence. The middle one is kind of still tiptoeing, it can just see. And the tall one can very clearly see over the fence.
Yeah.
Being equitable is going, okay, the smallest one is the shortest, we need to give them maybe 3 boxes, and then the middle one we might need to give 2 boxes, and the tall one maybe 1 box. And that way everyone gets to see it all at the same level. So that is considering the challenges, as you said, that they may face, and then making sure we are fulfilling uh, what they require in order to receive the same level or the same access.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We used to use that as part of our training in social services to help people really understand that. So thank you so much for bringing that forward, because I think everyone can kind of go, ah, I get it. And I know many of our
Yeah,
listeners will, are on the same page. And of course, everyone's on their journey, and there is always, we've all got more to learn all the time. We're always evolving, and there's always ways that we can actually do better. And I think it's the question I ask myself is, what's my bit to do? What can I do as part of the conversation and the contribution to the collective so that we can keep this moving forward? And there aren't children growing up in a world where we're facing all those isms that you were talking
yeah,
about, because there are so many different aspects that people can be affected by this inequity. And like you're saying, it's built into the systems that we're born into, so we're not going to have that awareness of um what we can't yet see until we start actually looking and considering
yeah, yeah.
what are the biases that we can't yet see, and starting to have conversations around it. You've got a radio show as well. I wanted to ask you about that because that sounds awesome. Tell us about your radio show. That just seems like such a great platform for conversations like
Oh,
this?
well, it's a past lifetime. I was a radio host.
Oh,
Yeah, so there's a community radio here. And it was amazing because after the Miss NAIDOC finalist stuff happened, I was invited as a guest. So Miss NAIDOC, if you're not aware, is for Aboriginal people to go in, and it does sound like it's a beauty pageant. We do get up on the catwalk and we do the walking, but it's more about a leadership. It's more about how, how we can center ourselves and start being part of the conversation and leading conversations in our community. So it's almost like a rite of passage is through this particular program into our communities. And then I jumped onto, I was interviewed on the radio and I left and I just thought to myself, I love that so much. That was so much fun. I love this talking stuff. And I was just in love with it. And amazingly, and maybe a week or 2 later, I was invited to come and be a co-host on that same program. So I was really excited and I absolutely jumped on that. Um, but it's quite a distance from me to get to the studio and back and all those kinds of things. And I've got 2 young children, so it didn't quite work out. But this is where podcasts are great too, because I can
yes.
still do the talking and reach amazing listeners out there. But yeah, that's kind of what we did.
Oh, fantastic. I think you're right. This is just an incredible tool to be able to get the message out and to have conversations with people because people can reach back out to you and continue the conversation, and to be able to explore, ultimately how they can contribute in a bigger way. I know you've mentioned that you've got your Inclusion Creators Collective membership. Who's that for? What kind is it for entrepreneurs?
It is. It is. It's on for online service-based business owners. And it's a space where I basically go, here is everything that you're going to need to either learn what you need to learn in the entrepreneurial space and inclusion, what you need to unpack, what biases you need to do. And if you have any questions, you've got customized support there from me. So it's kind of like an all in one membership that you can join. And it is a very safe space because I understand that when we are looking at things like our biases and uh, looking at maybe some of the ways we've been showing up,
Hmm.
and we realize that maybe it wasn't as nice as we thought it would be, or wasn't as inclusive as we thought it would be, and we may have unintentionally caused harm, that can be a really shock to the system. So I recognize that. So that's a space that I hold where it's like, yeah, I know it can be hard and it can jolt the system to realize that maybe who you believe yourself to be isn't necessarily how marginalized people have been receiving you. Uh, but we can work on it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. From now, what are we going to do? We don't have to sit with guilt. We don't have to sit with shame. How can we be in empowered state and go, okay, this is what I have done. This is what I'm going to do from here. And this is the kind of world that I want to create. So I'm going to do and be inclusive with all the knowledge that I have and take those steps forward. So it's really about empowering business owners to be quite open about, the state of what we're going through in the world, uh, to create businesses that are really considerate and inclusive and that go, hey, maybe what we have been doing is not that great, but I'm willing to listen and I'm willing to learn and I'm willing to adjust in order to create a more inclusive world together.
I love that. That's beautiful, and that's really a great standard to have for everyone to feel safe within the conversation. And I think you highlighted something there that I just wanted to kind of reflect on as well. Was around that. How are we being received? Because it's not just about what we think we are. I'm a good
Yeah.
person. I'm doing it this way. Except actually, it's not. let's ask and have the conversation. And also, it's on us to learn, to not wait for someone to be telling us that we've done it in the wrong way, as it were, or that they've felt harmed by whatever we've done, but actually to proactively go out and educate ourselves. I think, all business owners that are wanting to grow their businesses, we have a duty to actually make this one of our top priorities, our top values,
Yes.
and to prioritize it like we would with developing our money consciousness. Is actually, let's develop our inclusion consciousness and see where our biases are, because they're going to be hiding. So we might think we haven't
Yeah.
got any, but we've been born on this
Yeah.
planet, so we have, ultimately.
Absolutely. Well,
um,
business owners have a duty of care to provide safety for people who come into their spaces. And so if you're not making yourself aware of the things that can potentially harm marginalized people, which a lot of marginalizations are not seen as well.
mm,
So there may be people who you are working with right now, who you might be unintentionally harming through your business. So it's one of those things that absolutely is a core value that needs to be made a priority.
yeah. And you mentioned there about harming people, and I think that language is, what's the word I'm looking for? From conversations I've had with people in marginalized groups, where they've talked about the kind of day-to-day insidious tiny harmings. If I don't know what the word is, I'm trying
Yeah.
to look for.
Microaggressions.
Microaggression, thank you. I knew there was a term
Yeah.
for it, where people are blind to what they're saying, but actually it's creating a lot of stress in someone else because they're receiving this on a daily basis all the time. Is it possible to give some examples of that so people can kind of start to go, "Oh, hang on a second, I think I have actually done that myself."
Yeah, sure. So some of them might be these are some here in Australia. I'm sorry, I don't know
Okay.
too much about other contexts, but I'll give some of them.
That would be
They
helpful,
may
thank
be
you.
relevant.
Mm,
Things like for the Aboriginal community, we might be talking with someone who isn't Aboriginal, and we might be talking about our job, and they may say something like, "Oh, you've got that job. You must be so proud of yourself." Which is a really odd thing to say because any other adult who isn't Aboriginal, I'm not sure you would be saying you should be proud of yourself for having a job. It's a
right.
microaggression to suggest that Aboriginal people either don't work or are lucky to work or should feel lucky that they have a job in the end. Those kinds of things. It could be something like if you are talking to, it might even be an Aboriginal woman, say, and as you're talking, you would just automatically ask, "How many children do you have?" without knowing if they have any children or not. But if you consider if they're not Aboriginal, that's probably not a question you would ask because you have no idea if they have children or not. But there's like these assumptions that you know more about this person than you actually do know about this person. And a lot of these presumptions can link with quite harmful stereotypes of them as well. Another thing you could do, and this is certainly something that I see over and over in like the African American community, is people trying to touch their hair.
Mm,
Whereas another community, another person, why on earth would you think it's okay to go into someone's personal space and trying to touch them when
mm,
you don't know them? They're all these little things, and they're microaggressions. So it's like you have to put on this. It's almost like a community armor.
mhm,
I know I have to prepare myself whenever I'm out in public because general conversations can be wrapped in so much pseudo racism or casual racism that the person has no idea that they're saying.
mhm,
And I know what the basis of those things are and what the basis of those things mean. So it's affecting me and the other person feels like they've just had a wonderful conversation with someone. So they're walking away feeling like, "Oh, I'm great. Isn't it wonderful that we're all connected and we can have conversations with different people in the community?" But the marginalized person is walking away going, "I feel very hurt and very harmed by these interactions. And now I've got to go home and sit with them, but also experience them on my TV or on my radio or in advertisements or on my social media." It's something that you actually can't escape.
Thank you. Those were great examples, I think, of really understanding the nuances and what might feel subtle in being able to identify, hang on, where is this bias showing up? So that where we, if we catch ourselves in the moment of doing it, to kind of go, "Oh, hang on a second, I've just realized what I've done," and to be able to put it right and to continue doing the inner work so that we can start to recognize these subtleties and to be able to change them, because that's very stressful to be living in that environment when you've got that every day.
Yes.
I can only imagine from that perspective. Thank you. That, I think that's really tangible for people to be able to start to open their minds if they're not already doing the inner work around it, to kind of go, do you know what? I'm inviting everybody, all the listeners here, 2020, make 2024, if I can get the words out, the year that you prioritize inclusion, diversity, and equity in your business, because it will, it's our, like you were saying, it's our duty of care and our contribution to the collective. This is a topic that I could just chat to you for hours about. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom. To wrap up, what would be as we've probably touched on it, but the three sort of top tips that you would love entrepreneurs to take away from our conversation today?
Oh, top tips. I guess I could do top tips as more like actions they could probably take, because
Yes.
I'm all about action. Intentions don't do anything. Intentions don't create change in our world. Actions do. So here's some actions. The first thing I would get you to do is go onto your social media and flick through and have a look at all the content creators, everyone you're following, everyone who's in your feed. Do they all look the same? Do they all have the same ethnicity, the same culture? They all come from the same place? Do they all have the kind of the same ideas? Let's diversify that. So you can spend maybe 15 minutes, 10 minutes even, just searching people in your particular industry or just people from different communities who are talking about inclusion or what they require of your particular industry, and go follow some new voices. Have a look and listen to what they're talking about. Have a listen about the things they're calling for your industry to change or do, or even just in life. What are your community members saying needs to change in your space? Just diversify that. So that's one of the things. I'd also encourage you to consider how you are addressing your community. Quite often, when we address our communities, they are quite gendered. And often, when we are working with people, the gender actually doesn't make any difference. So you consider what gender you are working with and then address them accordingly. What I have found quite a lot of the time is that when people address their whole audience, they will say, "Hi, guys,"
Hmm.
but they'll be very, very open about saying, "I only work with women or people who identify as women." And that is a misalignment right there, because you're addressing guys. And that comes from a time when, even though there were women in the space, only the men or the guys were worth talking to. So even though you're there, women, I don't care. I'm only addressing the men in this space. So just consider that. But you could go even deeper and let's go, well, we don't even need to really talk about gender. What is the specific thing that ties all your people together? Are you copywriters? You can be like, "Hey, copywriters." Are you people who play instruments? Like, you could be like, "Hey, rock stars." It doesn't actually have to be gendered. So have a look and consider the way you're addressing your audience. The third one, what would I do? I would encourage you to just have a look at what is privilege. And just there are plenty of privilege tests and assessments and things like that on the internet. Just see the kinds of privileges that you have. Know that it's not bad or wrong if you have privilege. It is a wonderful, wonderful thing to know, because when you have privilege, that means you have power and influence to create change. And then you have choice. What are you going to do with your privilege? Are you going to continue on with the status quo, or are you going to choose to do it in a different way, a way that's more inclusive? And of course, I've got my quiz as well. There's a free quiz that I'm offering to all the listeners, which will give you an audit of your business inclusivity. If you want it, it is there for you.
That is amazing. But I can tell you're a radio host. You just did such a beautiful segue to your free gift. That was fantastic. I was thinking, okay, right, I want to shine the spotlight on your free gift. That is incredible. I'm going to be doing your free gift as well. That's very, very generous of you to share that. Thank you. I really, really appreciate that. Really appreciate your time and sharing all your wisdom. This is, as everyone's listening, it's a big, big conversation that, one podcast conversation isn't gonna touch on all the points. I would love to carry on the conversation. If you would love to come back, we'd love to have you back,
It would be my honor.
even though it's really late at night for you. So thank you so much for staying up. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Louise. And we will pop all your the link in the show notes and all your details. Just for those who are listening, where do people come and find you if they're driving in their car or something, like, I need to follow this woman? How can they follow you? What's the best place so that they can kind of get it into their brains and come
The
into your
best
world?
place the best place you can follow me is on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. They're the best places. Just quietly, I am maybe working on a podcast myself. So who knows? It might not eventuate, but I am working on it, and there are plans. But you know how we are as business owners. Sometimes our plans go all the way through, and sometimes they don't. But this is one that I'm hoping very, very dearly will come into fruition.
I'm hoping so too. I'll be signing up to listen to that for sure.
Yay!
Yeah, I'll be your first listener. You'll have a global audience in no time. Oh, Louise, thank you so, so much. Truly, this has just been fantastic. And I hope that I know this will have served our audience members as well. And just encourage everybody to go and find Louise O'Reilly, go and get in her world, and take up the invitation to educate ourselves, something that we can all do more of course, so that we can continue to have better conversations around this and to really make change. Thank you,
Yeah,
Louise.
you're so welcome. Just find the woman with the pink hair.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Louise, and thank you so much, everyone who's listened to this episode. We hope that this has served you, and until next time, we'll see you very, very soon. Lots of love. Thanks for listening to the Infinite Prosperity Podcast. And if you like what you've heard and want to know more, please go to louisahavers.com. We just appreciate you so much. So thank you for listening and hanging out with us. If there's anything that we can do for you, you can email us at louisa@louisahavers.com. Let my team know if you have any ideas for shows that you'd love to hear or topics you want me to talk about. Really looking forward to hearing from you. All right, that is it for this week, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today. Looking forward to connecting with you again. Until next time, namaste.